Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shannon Scriven. I'm with Workforce Solutions Capital Area. I serve Pflugerville ISD, and I'm so excited to be joined by Susan Word, President of Forward Connections, and Chase Kincannon. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Owner of
You got it right. You got it right. We're good.
Awesome. And we're going to be talking about how business plan for the unforeseen. What do you protect? Starting with our first question. All right, and Susan, I'm going to go ahead and ask you this one. So briefly speak on your educational background and what type of experience do you have that led you to where you are now?
Oh, well, first off, let me thank you guys for inviting me here and giving me the opportunity to speak with you guys. I have had a windy road of a career, beginning with my education. I got my bachelor's degree at Jacksonville State University in Jacksonville, Alabama, home of the Fighting Gamecocks. I'm sure you're familiar. And my degree was in biology. But as soon as I graduated, I raised my right hand and I spent the next 7 years flying helicopters in the United States Army. And I was a helicopter pilot and a maintenance test pilot. When I decided to shift my career, I went into production management and production supervision, and I spent the first 12 years in various companies in the semiconductor industry. As that industry goes, it shifted a time or two, and one company that I was with ended, but at the same time, a new company was born. And when that happens, everybody puts on two hats. And so besides being a production manager, I also became the HR manager. And so I spent the last 20 or so years in human resources. I got my graduate degree at University of Texas in Austin. And from there, I've been with various different companies and industries as a human resources director and business partner. And a few years ago, I stepped out and started my own HR consulting firm, which is called Forward Connections, a little play on my last name. A couple of years ago, close to a couple of years ago, I also joined Lynch Law Firm as an HR consultant on a part-time basis to help provide some additional assistance with her clients and provide a lot of flexibility for that. So that takes me to today.
That's perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. We had the opportunity to speak with Lynch Law Firm earlier today, so it's really nice to know that you're actually partnering with her and helping her out with her cases as well. And Chase, I'm going to go ahead and turn that question over to you as well. You want to speak briefly about your education and your experience where it led you to where you are today?
Sure, absolutely. And thank you to Workforce Solutions for having us, and welcome to all our viewers, I guess you could say. So I'll start with where I am and then how I got there. I have a couple of hats that I wear. My primary business is Capital Strategies, which is a financial planning firm. So I do fee-based financial planning, consulting, investment management, and dabble in a little bit of insurance. The other title that we have up under my name as a panelist is owner of Fossil Knob Ridge, which is I have 20 acres just outside Big Bend National Park, where I have built some vacation rentals built out of shipping containers. And we're currently in expansion right now, which is why you're seeing me from an RV, because I am way out in West Texas and spent the morning with financial clients on Zoom meetings. I'm spending the afternoon with you, and I'll spend the rest of the day outside, probably wearing a welding helmet, working on the expansion. So that's a little bit about me and where I am. My undergraduate degree is, I have a BA in history from Tarleton State University, which I'm pretty sure I've never actually used any of the history technique of that, but having a liberal arts degree was incredibly important in setting me up for being able to adapt to different situations. And it gave me a lot of quote unquote soft skills that have helped me get to where I am. I spent a little time as a personal trainer. I was a tour guide in the national park for a while. Kind of like Susan, I flew planes, but I quickly crashed one. Wasn't my fault. I survived clearly, but decided that probably didn't need to be a pilot. In 2006, I got an insurance license and started working for one of the major insurance firms in the US. I got investment licenses in 2007. In 2013, I was asked by a different large insurance and financial company to go into management and help them train new advisors. And I did that for about 3 years before I decided to hang my own shingle and have my own financial planning practice. So that's kind of where I am today. I hope that answers your question. And also I have a crew of construction workers just outside. So if you hear like saws or hammers banging or something, I'll mute myself until it's time for me to talk again. I'm so sorry, everybody.
Thank you for letting us know, Chase. And yes, Natalie actually told me a little bit or showed me a little bit about your shipping containers, and I was honestly just blown away. I love the idea. So definitely very good idea.
It's a wild ride, I'm telling you.
Very nice. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into our second question. All right, so Susan, what is the most common financial issue that affects small businesses? From your experience working with them, how do you advise them to correct course?
Well, you know, when you look at some of the things that, especially this year, people have found themselves in a lot of different financial situations that are least expected, but in general, the same things recur, whether it's a weird year like 2020 or normal times, and that's cash flow. Having enough revenue coming in on a regular basis to be able to pay the bills, pay the staff, and all of those sorts of things. You know, it's one thing to be really good at what you do, but when you own your own business, you not only have to be good at what you do, but you also have to be able to manage the dollars as they come in and go out so that you always can do that. Now, I'm a human resources person, and so I think not only in the broader business sense, but I then, you know, narrow my focus into some of the particular things that I see companies struggle with, especially around cash flow, and that is their staffing, and sometimes around the staffing, you know, whether or not they can offer benefits. And so, you know, as you grow your organization and as you, you know, expand your business, you have to be able to balance those things that are providing enough work for the individuals to do if you're going to hire additional people, but at the same time, you have to have that cash flow because you don't want to miss a paycheck. Missing payroll is the cardinal sin. And then, you know, the second thing around the same people issues and cash flow is that to be competitive, a lot of businesses really want to offer some kind of benefits to be able to recruit people, and benefits cost money. So again, cash flow is one of those things that all of those opportunities and all of those things that wrap around employing people to run your business require that steady cash in and out. I'm going to turn the rest over to Chase.
Well, now that you've taken all of my thoughts and notes and put them far more elegantly and succinctly than I ever could, thanks a lot, Susan.
My pleasure.
No, I 100% agree. The most common financial issue that I see is cash flow. And in all the questions today, I think my refrain that I'm going to keep repeating is going to revolve around cash flow, cash reserves, cash on hand. But let me zoom out from cash flow for just a minute, and I'd like to expand. I think it's important to expand on a really key point that Susan hit. most folks who start their own business do it because they're following a passion or an opportunity.
Mhm.
And let's say you're a really good widget maker and you have an awesome widget that everybody wants, and you have developed great skill at building widgets. That means you have one of about 50 qualifications that you need to have
Yeah.
to successfully start and run a business. And so cash flow is one of the trees that make up a forest of pitfalls and landmines that are out there for entrepreneurs starting out. Because like Susan said, you might be the world's best widget maker, but that doesn't mean you know how to properly hire someone. It doesn't mean you know how to balance your books. It doesn't mean you understand basic accounting principles. It doesn't mean that you're prepared in any way to run a business. It means you're a really great widget maker. So I think the other recurring theme that you'll probably hear a lot from me today is arm yourself with as much information as possible before you make that leap and start your own business. Or if you've already made that leap and started, there's still a ton of things you can do to expand your knowledge base. And there are a multitude of resources that are available to you, most of which don't cost anything other than time, that significantly and dramatically increase the chances that your business is successful and sustainable over a long period of time.
Yeah.
That said, on that cash flow front, because I think that is the number one financial issue that really knocks small businesses back a few steps. Does that widget you're selling have enough demand to create enough revenue to support your salary and all your business expenses? We see a lot of business owners who can afford to pay their staff but can't afford to pay themselves. That's okay if it's part of your business plan, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about later. But also not just cash flow, but cash reserves. Have you ever seen a restaurant pop open and then, like, before you even had a chance to go eat there, they were already out of business? I've seen this, I don't know how many times, but I cannot fathom spending the incredible amount of capital it takes to start a restaurant without having enough cash reserves to be able to support that business for at least 6 months. And when I see a restaurant pop up and 3 months later it's closed, banning, COVID conditions, barring COVID conditions, it tells me that they never sat down with someone who knew what they were doing and knew how to successfully run a business, a restaurant, who told them you really need a cash reserve of 6 months operating expenses after you've set up before you can open your doors. Otherwise, you don't stand a chance. Your business doesn't have the incubation period it takes to start making money.
Right.
So cash reserves, and that falls back into that category of arming yourself with that information. There's one other point I'd like to make on this topic. There's a long-held business adage that there's an inverse relationship. When you're looking at starting a new business, there's an inverse relationship between risk and likelihood of success. I'm sorry, let me say that again because I messed it up. There's an inverse relationship between the capital required to start a particular business and the likelihood of success. And I'll give you some really obvious examples. It takes a lot of capital to open a McDonald's franchise. I don't know the exact number, but I know it's got 2 commas in it, okay? But by the time you go through that process and spend the money and you open your McDonald's franchise, the likelihood of that McDonald's being successful is very, very high.
Yep.
On the other hand, if we think of a business that has a really low startup expense, and I got my start selling insurance. So let's say you're going to go out and start trying to sell car insurance to all your friends, which costs a couple $100 to go get a license. And believe me, there's insurance companies out there that'll let you sell their products for free.
Yeah.
So very low startup expenses, but the likelihood of being successful, of being a second-year insurance agent or a 15th-year insurance agent, is incredibly small. So keep that in mind, the inverse relationship between startup capital and likelihood of success. You can be successful with a venture that has low startup, but it makes it that much more important that you gather as much information as you can, that you build a good team around you, and that you know where to go to find resources. So we'll come back to that. But
Yeah.
I think that's enough from me on that question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you both, Susan and Chase, for sharing that. If we learned anything, I think it's so important that we do have our resources and that we do have professionals that we can lean on when, you know, we are starting those small businesses and opening up. So very good. Thank you guys so much. Let's go. Yeah, thank you. All right, so Chase, for you, how has COVID-19 changed the challenges that small businesses face?
Wow.
You know, I have a lot of clients who are businesses, who either the business itself is a client or the business owner is a client. And I really think there's about 4 different categories. There's probably more, but from my anecdotal experience, there's 4 categories of ways that COVID has hit small business owners. And I think it could be grouped into social distancing, changes in the way we travel, limited indoor activities, and finally, I'd say market fluctuation or what's happening in the stock markets. And so I can obviously expand on each of these, but I think they're fairly obvious. There's a lot of businesses, you know, restaurants, for example, we can't do a lot of indoor dining, or it's been greatly impacted. The way we travel, my vacation rentals were shut down for 2 months, and we did 5 figures worth of reservation refunds, because Brewster County said we're not participating in tourism until we know what's going on with this virus. Think about hotels, hotel chains. There's been a lot of impact on the travel industry, the airline industry. Oh my God, the challenges they face are incredible. All of these, no matter which category a business falls into of how COVID has negatively impacted it, there's one, I think, stable truth, and that is the business who has the most prudent reserve, in other words, cash on hand, has the most options. And I'm careful how I say that, because what I don't want to say is the business with the most cash is the most likely to survive the pandemic, because I think that's way more complicated. But for those businesses who have consulted with experts and determined what does a prudent reserve need to look like for my business, and then actually discipline themselves, and please understand, to actually save that amount, please understand that as a business owner, whenever you've got cash on hand, you start going, how can I deploy this so that it grows my business, grows our profits? I'm ready to hire that next person. There's always an opportunity in front of you. And the least sexy option is leaving that money sitting in a bank account. There's so much opportunity cost to that as a business owner. So that's another reason why I use the term prudent reserve. There's always a prudent amount of cash that should be held back, and it varies based on what kind of business, what industry you're in, whatever. But the businesses that had those cash reserves in the event of emergency are the ones who have the most options. So no matter how COVID has impacted them, they have the longest runway to figure out, how are we going to adapt to this? How are we going to change our business model? How are we going to adapt our marketing, whatever it is, and get that off the ground? Because they have the mental bandwidth and the financial bandwidth to say, okay, we've got 6 months of payroll covered before we're in real trouble. And the kind of decisions that you make from that mindset tend to be healthier, I think, than the decisions you make in desperation, where you're going, payroll is due on Friday. I don't know what I'm going to do.
Right.
So again, I don't think that those prudent reserves guarantee the success or are the answer, end all be all solution to how COVID's impacted your business. But I do think it's probably one of the most important things that buys you the time and gives you the most options.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Chase. And to turn it over to you, Susan, how would you say COVID-19 has changed the challenges that small businesses face?
Yeah, so I think that it highlighted those things much more so than in what was the normal before COVID. As Chase said, and those 4 areas are absolutely on the spot. But to build on that and having that preparation, as in the cash reserves and having a plan in place, those companies that had good plans for any type of disaster had something to fall back on, even though this one was very different than a previous type of disaster that may have been planned for, like a natural disaster like a tornado or something, not so much as a fire. Those things can be detrimental to a company, and falling back on those cash reserves or having that plan in place to say, well, if things happen, how am I going to react? And so the companies that had those plans in place and had a good team behind them, they are the ones that did have the best opportunity for surviving through these major changes. The other thing that I think that really hit folks, especially with those organizations that do serve the public more than others, in a general sense, they were the ones that really faced that dilemma of, how do I keep my business afloat, i.e. the cash reserves, and being able to be compassionate with the people that are on my staff, and being able to have, like Chase said, the cash on hand that would guarantee I had enough reserves to be able to make payroll for whether it's 3 months, 6 months, or more. Those were the ones that had the most options. But even in the best of times, if you don't have those things, you may find some struggle. But during the COVID thing, when so much changed so rapidly, it wasn't like an economic downturn that slowly came into being. It was an immediate one day to the next. And so there were a lot of things that changed with how people staffed. But the thing that I think came across to me that I have been amazed by so many companies that got creative. They found ways to generate revenue in ways that may or may not have been anywhere near their normal business plan. And that's the thing that business owners, that untapped or undefined skill that business owners have to have, in some way or another, is not just problem solving, but real creativity. How am I going to take my business in a different direction because the current direction is no longer an option? And much as what Chase said, you have to have that team behind you. Running a business is a team sport. Even if you're a solopreneur, it is a team sport. And having that team behind you, whether it's your financial advisor, your CPA, your business attorney, your HR person, having those people in your team where you can call on them for advice is just the only way that you're going to really be able to run these ideas by people and find ways to make your business successful in a new direction. And COVID really tapped some cool creativity in businesses out there. And I'll tell you that, that Chase referred to, being a really good widget maker. And sometimes that widget was not what was needed at the time, so they found ways to make another widget, or found a different revenue stream. Maybe they kept the same revenue in one way, but for instance, some of the restaurants and things, did takeout. Some of the bars just started serving food, those kinds of things. But they found other ways to do the same thing they were doing. And then others went in a completely new direction and found multiple streams of revenue. And I think that those levels of creativity are really the things that have been the positive outcomes of this full COVID weird year. Let's see, I think the other thing that I think just sort of goes along with that is that there has to be ways to continue to generate revenue, no matter whether it's the same or different, types of things that you're doing. But without revenue, you're not going to survive. So you have to think about how you cut down on those expenses and how you generate revenue. And you can only cut expenses to a certain amount. But a lot of businesses also found that, working from home and those kinds of alternate workplaces have saved them a ton of money. And that has kept them alive for a lot longer. And so just creativity and using those things to generate revenue is really the thing that I think has been one of the biggest things that these businesses have faced, and what they've done to overcome them.
Yeah, for sure. Especially during COVID. I agree, Susan, when you mentioned creativity. We've seen so many businesses step outside of their normal box and to find a new way to deliver their products or whatnot. And Chase, you also mentioned a really good point where you said businesses should check to see, do they have enough cash flow for 6 months to provide monies to their employees. But I just had another quick little question, like for our high school students who are interested in starting their own business. When they are drafting their business plan, should they automatically include that plan B in there to prepare for things like natural disasters or like COVID, or should it come once they've established their business?
In my perspective, if you don't plan, you're not going to be ready. And the best time to have a plan is before it ever happens. So as you're drafting your business plan, know what the perfect world looks like and those typical ups and downs, but have a section in there of the what ifs, and what if yourself to death. And get your team behind you to what if things, and it'll be irritating and annoying, and it'll be enlightening and sometimes invigorating to think of, oh, well, I didn't think about that. And there's another thing that we could incorporate in the normal business, or we can have, I didn't realize that I needed 6 months worth of cash reserves. Maybe I need to think about another source of capital in trying to initially fund it. So yeah, I think that those are, planning ahead for the disasters and what if is something that you should do upfront.
Let me add something to that very quickly.
Sure.
There's an old saying that says, if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans.
You're right.
And so in financial planning, which is a very structured process, whenever we come up with a plan, what we're doing is we're building a strategy to get a client from point A to point B. You're here, you want to be there. These are the things you have to do to get there, right? And every plan we deliver, we do what's called stress testing. And it's the same, very similar in concept to what Susan's talking about, the what ifs. It's what if everything doesn't go to plan? What if a boogeyman comes out and knocks us on our butts and we're not able to, not everything goes smoothly. And so we stress test and say, what if we take this element out of it? What if we take this revenue stream out? What if the market tanks? What if I lose my job? All these kinds of things. And we build a plan that has contingencies or is so strong that it can adapt and work anyway. So I'm glad you brought up business plans, because I look forward to talking about them, but I think any good business plan is going to withstand some serious stress testing. If you haven't stress tested your business plan, you're not done with your business plan yet.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. Thank you both for answering that, Susan and Chase. All right, let's go on to number 3 or 4. All right, so what sort of upfront costs and systems need to be in place at the launch of a small business? And Susan, I'll give this question to you first.
Oh, well, the list goes on and on. But there are some basic things that have to be done just to form the company. And that is, setting up whether it's a DBA or doing business as or a LLC or whatever structure you're going to have for your business, and looking at what the environment is around that. And so depending on the type of business, if it is, a single person solopreneur doing business, the costs are a little bit more reduced. But as soon as you start adding people, as soon as staff are going to be hired, you need to think about some of the things that not only protect your business through your business structure, but business insurance. So there's some general insurance, and it's called P&C, or property and casualty insurance. What happens to the business if there's a fire and the building goes up or whatever, those kind of things. There's other types of insurance, and all of these things are there to mitigate risk. But if you have people could trip and fall or hurt themselves. So there may be workers' compensation insurance. Whether or not it is a requirement under the law is not necessarily the decision-making point. What you need to think about is if somebody were to get hurt, can I afford to help get them, pay their medical expenses? And then there are other types of risk mitigating insurance, like employment practices insurance and things like that. So there are some of those things that fall under that insuring category. But I talked about earlier, one of the things that, about a small business is it's a team sport. So right up front, go ahead and plan for and ensure that you've got the expenses to pay your team. And this is even before you hire people. This is your employment attorney, your financial planner, your CPA, your insurance brokers. But go ahead and get those funding set up before you even think about hiring people. And then as you start to think about hiring people, you start putting in these other protections. And then it's, who do you need to have on your staff? Small business owners are notorious for wanting to do everything themselves, right? They know it all, they do it all, they are the bestest widget maker in the world. Yeah, I know, Chase, I can't look at myself in the mirror and say that without laughing too, because
I literally
I'm
next to me have my welding helmet and gloves for this afternoon, because I just can't turn it all over.
Exactly. So with that, you have to balance that need to work on the business and work in the business. And that requires oftentimes to hire additional staff, whether that is as employees or through contract or any number of different ways. But those are also those costs that you need to think about as you're planning your business, because you can't go out and get clients if you're spending all your time doing your work, and vice versa. So I think that's those things for me are those first initial upfront costs. Chase, I know I left a bunch of stuff out. What do you got?
Well, I think you nailed the ingredients list. And instead of talking about the ingredients, let me talk about the recipe.
Perfect.
The recipe is your business plan.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we just talked about stress testing the business plan, but what the heck is a business plan? And I get asked all the time by people, smart people who have no idea where to start with a business plan. And I'll say this, you don't need an MBA. A business plan just breaks down the nuts and bolts and step by step that says, here's how I'm going to get this business off the ground. Here's how much it's going to cost. Here's how I'm going to make money. Here's how this is going to be successful. And I think the most important system that you need in place when you launch your small business is a fully vetted and as bulletproof as you can make it business plan. And the business plan is going to include all of those ingredients that Susan just talked about. What type of entity do you need? What type of insurance do you need? What type of personnel will you need? What is your schedule for being able to afford and for hiring those personnel? But at its core foundation, the business plan explains how your idea is going to be profitable enough to pay for all these expenses and pay you a salary and cover all your staff and have a prudent reserve of cash, right? So I think it's important to go through that and then go to those resources that you have, the people that you've surrounded yourself with, this team sport, and show them your business plan and say, what kind of questions should I be asking that I'm not? If you were in my shoes, what would you change? What needs to be done differently? I think at this stage of the game, the information you can gather and borrow from other experts, that's the number one asset that you need to amass, to get for yourself, is all that information. And a business plan will indicate whether your business model can scale. A business plan should be able to indicate, is this something that you're going to part-time your way into? Like, I've got a job working for someone else, but I start this on the side, and here's my plan to get it to the point where I can quit my job and just do this full time. Sort of a transition into entrepreneurship, which is perfectly legitimate and reasonable. You need to have a plan. Does your business model need, I'll call it an anchor client, like one really important client that guarantees that you're going to be able to pay your bills while you're gathering other smaller clients, things like that. But going back to the overarching point that I'm trying to make is all these ingredients need to be part of a recipe, and you need to be real. I can't encourage you strongly enough to be real open about your recipe with other experts in that field, with the people on your team, and have them help you make sure you've thought about all those different aspects.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Thank you, Susan and Chase. You guys gave great answers to that question. Before we move on to our next question, I just want to let our audience know that the Q&A is open. So if you guys do have any questions for Susan or Chase, go ahead and type those into the Q&A and we will get to it after our last question. All right, so our next question. And Chase, I'm going to direct this one to you. What advice would you give excited prospective business owners who are ready to start their own business starting tomorrow?
Don't wait till tomorrow. Do it today. No. That's sort of the opposite problem that I see a lot of is analysis paralysis. Are you going to do this one day, or is this day one? But all joking aside, I think if you're that ready and you're that excited and you're ready to make that leap, it's really building that team of experts around you, and that's never going to stop. You're always going to be working with a team and developing that team, and players will change, but don't be afraid to hire experts, whether your financial planner, your CPA, your HR person, insurance broker. We've mentioned these before. Don't be afraid to hire experts, spend money on them, But I'm going to go a step further and say there's some, you're probably not going to see this in a business class, and I don't have a business degree, so I wouldn't even know, but there's an intangible quality, and I call it sort of the eye contact test. When I'm working with people that I know are going to be integral and vital to my business's success, I kind of have this eye contact test of, is this somebody I'm actually going to enjoy spending time with? Is this someone that I actually trust, like with my business? Is this somebody that I would have over to my house for dinner, assuming it were safe during COVID? I'm on a personal first name basis with my CPA. I'm on a personal first name friendly basis with my business attorney, with all of my insurance agents, with my property managers out here, business coaches, consultants. These are all people that I consider business partners and almost like family to me. I think all of the people in those categories have been to my house, like not to talk business, but hey, y'all come over for dinner. Because those relationships are so key. Don't fool yourself into thinking that you can become a successful entrepreneur with no help from anybody ever. Was it Plato, Socrates said the wisest man is the one who realizes he's the least wise. And pardon my language for not being gender neutral, but I think, you know, however many millennia ago that was, they didn't have that. And so that humility of saying, I really don't know the best step forward, but I've surrounded myself with people who have so much expertise that within 3 phone calls to these people that I have on speed dial that are my friends and trusted colleagues, I'm going to have a pretty clear idea of what the next steps need to be. Because the business is going to throw you curveballs. Some of them you can sort of see coming and other ones you can't. But especially when you're getting started, build those relationships. Have those people look at your business plan. And when they tell you, and you should trust them enough and give them permission to tell you when you have a bad idea, listen to them. One of the things I catch myself saying a lot is, okay, I've got an idea. I don't know if it's a good idea. It's an idea. Let's talk about it and figure it out. And I think that's a really helpful attitude to have, because ultimately, I don't want any ego in the process. I want to make sure that the outcome is a desirable one. And so being able to let go of ownership of the idea that saved the business or started the idea or started the business or whatever it is, allow those people to give you the help, advice you need, listen to them, respect them, and cultivate those relationships. There's a lot of different ways I could take the answer to this question, but I think for me, that's one of the most vital keys to my success, having started several businesses now.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. You have to be able to, like we mentioned earlier, you have to be able to be open to other people's criticism. You have to know, like, you have a team of people who you can lean on, and when you need that support, don't be afraid to do so, and don't be too prideful, I suppose.
Absolutely, and I think there's one more layer to that is important enough to discuss, if only briefly. Find people in your industry, whatever business you're thinking about starting. Find what you would consider to be the competition. Mm-hmm. And I have been continually surprised that for the most part, my competition, we have more in common than we have apart, than not. And if you think about it, you both have similar passions. You like the same industry. You're both really good at widget making or whatever it is. And ask them with all humility, you know, I'd love to, I'm thinking about going into business, making widgets. And I know that's what you do. You've been very successful. And that's the reason I would really love to pick your brain. And you'd be surprised how many people you perceive as competition wind up being almost mentor-like figures for you. But there's some key questions to ask those people. Can I pick your brain? If you were me, what would you do? If you started over from scratch, how would you do it differently? You know, you've been doing this for 30 years. If you were in my position at my age, do you think this industry has the support for me to be as successful as you are 30 years from now? But go to those people who are who you want to be and ask for their help, ask for their advice, show them your business plan. For the most part, you'll be shocked at how receptive they are. Who doesn't like being asked for advice? Who doesn't want to be an expert? And most folks will find the bandwidth to be a mentor, even if it's just for a phone call or might start a lifelong relationship. But those people in your chosen field could wind up being some of the best resources and allies you'll ever make.
That's a really great approach. Go to the competition to gain some insight. That's really amazing. Thank you for that, Chase. And Susan, I'm going to turn this question over to you. What advice would you give to those prospective business owners?
Yeah, well, Chase didn't leave me much to build on here, but there are a couple of things that are different. I mean, everything that he said is absolutely it. And there's one part of this, the resounding theme of relationships in your team that I want to continue to build on. And, team, Jace mentioned about asking the competition or those folks that you might want to emulate in your business, or at least, have some similarity. I'll give you a little bit of an example of maybe it is the competition, but the relationships that I've built in my business, and that is that there are many of us that do very similar things to what I do, which is, human resources consulting. And you could take this and jump it into almost any industry in there, but knowing who your peers are and building strong relationships with those peers, not just for what would you do to start your business, but to build that cohort or consortium of experts that you can connect with when you're either have questions about something that's going on and you need to pick somebody's brain, or something that is just outside of your expertise, but you want to make sure that your clients are well cared for. And my colleagues and I all operate under the philosophy of abundance. There is plenty of jobs and plenty of work and plenty of clients to be had out there. Part of it is you got to go out and find them. But the other part is that I don't do everything and I can't be an expert in everything. So who of my colleagues do I have relationships with and trust enough to refer to somebody else to refer my client to another, maybe in the similar industry, because that's their expertise. And so relationships, whether it be with your integral team, with the folks that may be your competition and you want to seek out wisdom and guidance, or the team of colleagues that may be your competition, but also are your partners in business. And those may be in the same industry or not in the same industry. I've worked really hard at times to broaden my network of just smart business people in other fields that I can also refer potential clients to, or current clients for other services. And that relationship building can take you an awful long way. To get off of that relationship track, there's one other thing that came to my mind when you talk about back to the original question of a prospective business owner wanting to get out and get started. Absolutely go do it. But be sure you understand what your level of risk tolerance is, because some businesses are not going to take off right away. And your life savings may be at risk to be consumed by this new venture. And so do you have the wherewithal to go do it? I'm not going to say it's like Las Vegas, but in some instances, think of that gambler that will put a $5 bill out there versus the person that's going to put a $500 bill out there. Do they make those? Anyway, so what level of risk are you willing to take with your time, with your money, and with your ability to reach out to other people? And can you live with that level of risk? If it's much like when I talk to people about their 401k or their financial prospects in within their retirement plans. If they have a retirement plan and they're looking at the stock market every day to see whether it's up or down, up or down, up or down, that, you know, and if it goes down a little bit, they start crying in their milk, right? That is not a level of risk that is where they need to be. They need to put it in a safer investment. Well, the same thing goes with a business owner. If you can't sort of stomach that level of risk and you're going to make yourself crazy or give yourself an ulcer because you're worrying every day about the success of the organization, then you know, you may need to give it a second thought of, is this the right business, or is this the right time for me to be able to invest in this business? So risk tolerance is a huge piece of it. So I love the people that are excited and want to get out there and they put up their business plan. You know, I wish I was as smart as, you know, the guys at Southwest, and my whole business plan was on a napkin and they drew the little triangle. That, you know, that goes back in history, but, you know, get down there, do the dirty work, write those plans, get those contingencies, build those relationships, but know who you are and how you can handle the ups and downs, the stress of it, and the risk that is going to come along with it.
Thank you. That was a really good point, Susan. That, you know, everyone should know that when they start a business, there are going to be risks associated with it. You should be prepared for those risks. So thank you both, Chase and Susan, for answering that question and giving great responses. So that is pretty much it for our seminar, our panel today. This is our social media information. So definitely feel free to check us out on all of our platforms below. And this video or the seminar is also being recorded. So this video will be uploaded to our YouTube channel as well for future viewing.